What would be better at this point from purely on an economic analysis, paying down the debt or cutting taxes?
Well, let me talk about paying down the debt, because that ties in with your Social Security problem.
Yes.
They're not really paying down the debt. They're converting funded debt. No, they're converting funded debt to unfunded debt because of the coming problem in Social Security. Let's look at it this way.
Right.
They pay down the debt. They buy up government bonds. What do they do with those government bonds? They put them over here in a box labeled Trust Fund for Social Security. Now you come to the period when current receipts from wage tax are too sparse to pay benefits.
Right, in the Social Security.
So they take these bonds out and sell them again to the public. How else are they going to pay for it? So what you're doing is simply changing the form of the debt, but you're not really reducing the debt because you've got this.
These obligations are going to be there.
And their present value is a debt.
Right.
And that debt is all recorded in this fake trust fund, which is pure paper artifice, has no real role.
But if you cut taxes,
yeah,
what does that do to help the government meet its unfunded obligations?
It doesn't do a thing, but let's go back.
Right.
To meet the unfunded obligations, you really need a change in Social Security.
All right.
All of the rest of this talking about paying down the debt as a way of solving the Social Security problem
is nonsense.
Is an evasion. In the long run, government will spend whatever the tax system will raise, plus as much more as it can get away with. That's what history tells us, I think. And so my view has always been cut taxes on any occasion, for any reason, in any way that's politically feasible. That's the only way to keep down the size of government.
Social Security, how would you fix it, Milton?
The only way really to fix it in the long run is to convert it into a strictly privatized investment funds. Because what you really need is to increase savings. You see, why is it that when you get a life insurance policy, for example, you don't have the same problem? Why is it that there isn't an unfunded liability of the life insurance companies? Why don't they have a problem in the future? And the answer is because when you pay for your life insurance policy,
I'm paying for my life insurance
your
policy.
life insurance,
right.
The company takes that money and invests it in real capital.
Right.
And that real capital, the machine, the building, the house, whatever it is, provides an income which will be available to pay you your benefits when the time comes.
Right.
On the other hand, in the case of the present Social Security system, the money you pay isn't being used to produce any real capital that will be productive in the future. It's being put into pieces of paper to promises to pay. There's nothing there which will yield more income. So the only real solution to Social Security is to shift to a system under which you have higher savings, under which you have fully funded benefits, fully funded annuities. But without going into too much technical detail, the essence of it is that you have to shift to a privatized system. You have to recognize that for a while you're going to have to pay twice, as it were.
Right. That is to say, my generation or the one that follows will have to pay for retirees and themselves.
The young have always paid for the Social Security of the old.
Right.
But what it used to be is that people, the young would pay for the Social Security of their parents. Now the young pay for the Social Security of somebody else's parents.
Right.
And that's a change for the worse and not the better. I think it's a very unjust system.
You don't buy, I mean, even the harshest critics of the welfare state say, look, we have to admit that Social Security eliminated poverty among the elderly. That is the one success that everyone agrees on, right?
Sure. And at what cost?
All right.
Tell me, here's a young man, 40 years old. He suddenly discovers he's got AIDS. He's got 10 more years to live. And the government comes along and say, we have to take 15% of your income to provide for your old age after 65.
And it's by law, and we don't care when you die. We're going to take that money. Right.
Is that just?
No, that's ridiculous.
We want responsible individuals. People should take care of their own old age.
Education, Milton.
Education ought not to be a federal issue.
But the president has to say something about it.
Yes.
All the polls show that it's
I'll
at the
tell you
top
what
of
he
people's
should say.
concerns. What should he say?
What he should say. I am announcing tonight that the Federal Department of Education is disbanded,
Right.
that the amount of money that we are now sending to the states, we will continue to send in the form of free funds for them to use at a declining rate and get through with that subsidy over the next 10 years. And we want the education to be handled by the individual states, by the local governments, by the parents. That the parents are the only ones who have a real responsibility for the schooling of their children. There is nothing in the Constitution that justifies the federal government being involved in schooling children. In the period from 1929 to 1950, spending on medical care in the United States never it was between 3 and 5% of national income.
1929 to 1950?
Yeah.
Between 3 and 5%.
Roughly.
That's low.
Well,
I mean, by comparison with anything I ever heard about what's going on today.
yeah.
right.
Today it's 14%.
All right.
Today the nation is spending more on medical care than on all the food, alcohol and tobacco they put in their mouth. We've had an absolutely tremendous overshoot increase. And what's more, the U.S. spending on medical care is way out of line with other countries.
All right, so you're suggesting then that this is out of whack. It's not just
Absolutely out of whack.
due payment for all these marvelous breakthroughs we've had.
All of these other countries have had these marvelous breakthroughs. The second highest country is now Germany at 10%. 14, we're over 14, they're 10.
So we should, of course, socialize our medical system the way Germany has.
Yes, that's one answer, but it's not the right answer. If we really fully socialized the medical system,
Right.
costs would go down
They would indeed go down.
because government would ration medicine.
Okay, so
Now,
the right answer
let me go back. The reason we have trouble, fundamental reason why we have high expenses and trouble, is because everything is a third-party payment. Nobody pays for himself. Very rarely. That's an exaggeration.
right.
But most payments for medicine are third-party payments. The insurance company pays, the government pays, but if you're my physician and I come to you, there's no payment between us.
Right.
And as a result, everybody is spending everybody else's money. And nobody spends somebody else's money as carefully as he spends his own. Why should people have to get their medical care in that way? Why shouldn't they be able to arrange for it themselves? Why shouldn't they be able to pay for it directly? The problem really resolves itself into catastrophe versus ordinary. With respect to ordinary medical care expenses, they're relatively modest. There's no reason why people can't pay for them on their own.
Ordinary would be, I have a cold, my kids get the flu, that sort of thing.
You have an annual examination. You take your kids in for a regular examination.
Right.
Those are the ordinary expenses.
Right.
The catastrophic expenses arise when you have a major thing. You
AIDS,
know,
heart attack, cancer.
Right. And in most areas, we buy insurance only for catastrophic expenses.
Right.
You don't insure your house for against the cost of having to mow your lawn.
No.
You
Just
don't
depends-
insure your car in such a way that if you buy gasoline, you get repaid by the insurance company.
Right. Right.
But in medical care, we've gotten almost to that point, where medical insurance provided by the employer, if you have to get some aspirins, you have to get approval and it's paid for. That's a little exaggeration because
not that much.
There are deductibles,
Right.
but the deductibles are relatively small.
Right.
And so the system that should have developed, it seemed to me, is a system under which people would buy insurance for catastrophic expenses, very, very high deductible of $4,000 or $5,000 a year, not a few hundred or 1,000. But with the employer-provided medical care, that's not, of course, what you're going to have.
Right.
But so
As with any tax exemption, there's a huge incentive to push as much under the exemption as you can.
Of course.
Right. Okay.
So it has two effects. It causes you to have this third-party payment, but it also causes you to spend more on medical care than you would spend if you were free to dispose of your income after tax as you wish.
Right.
So the right solution, in my opinion, is again to privatize. And there are two ways to do that.
Right.
You can either eliminate the tax exemption, which I think is politically not feasible,
Right.
or you can spread the tax exemption and say it will apply.
Spread it. Go ahead.
It will apply to expenses paid by you. See, if you pay now, the medical care expenses you pay now out of your own pocket
Are after tax?
are after-tax
Right.
income. But with medical savings accounts, you set it up so that you put money into the medical saving account, and when you pay your medical
Untaxed money.
untaxed money, when you pay your medical care from that, it's not subject to tax.
So
That would extend the tax exemption, but permit the elimination of employer-provided, or at least the substitution of personally provided medical care.
and what would you do? You'd phase out Medicaid and Medicare somehow?
In my ideal situation, I would phase out Medicare and Medicaid, but I would have government provide catastrophic insurance, voucherize it.
You would keep the location of catastrophic insurance in the government?
No.
Just explain what
I'm
you mean.
under Medicare.
All right.
The government is committed to paying for a certain part of my medical care.
Right.
Let them give me a voucher which I can use to buy a catastrophic insurance policy,
I see.
equal to the amount that they're committed to spend on me.
I see.
But let
But the
the market
decision now
work,
becomes that of the individual in the
and
marketplace.
let the market work.
Now, Milton, here's what I see you counseling the next president to say. My fellow Americans,
You're the
we're
speechwriter.
we're
I'm not.
eliminating Social Security. I'm whacking the Department of Education. I'm phasing out Medicare and Medicaid. And by the way, this tax exemption for medical expenses when it's paid by the employer, I'm looking askance at that too. Now, this is a little hard to
That's why I'm not a politician.
Okay. Now, here's my last question then.
You're never going to do all of these,
Right.
but it's well to have in mind what you'd like to do,
Oh, that is for certain.
so that
right.
the incremental, everything has to be done incrementally. It will
Right.
be done.
Right.
But unless you have in mind where you want to go, you're not sure your steps are taking you there.
Right.
And so I'm not putting this forth as a practically feasible platform for tomorrow. I'm saying let's look at the long run, where you would like to be, and let's ask ourselves with respect to each proposal, does it take it in that direction or does it take it in the opposite direction?